So every single one of us has potential. The challenge is realizing that potential and unlocking that potential, right? So the question is not whether we have potential or not, it's realizing that potential and unlocking that potential, right? I want to speak a little bit about realizing potential. I'm not going to speak a lot about that, but hopefully I'll say some things that will help us to maybe discover that. I'm going to speak more about unlocking that potential. But I want you to cast your mind back to when you were very young. All right? Think about when you were very young, some of your earlier memories. Do you remember how you were? All right, for some of us in the room, those early memories were a little bit longer ago than some of us, but some of us maybe just a few years ago. But can you remember how you were? Can you remember some of your interests? Can you remember some of the different or unique things about you? Some of the things that maybe people noticed about you, right? Can you remember maybe some of your ways of thinking? Can you remember some of your interests? Can you remember some of your passions? Often, those things about us from very, very early on have a lot to do with our potential and our purpose, right? I believe we were born with this. We were born with these, right? They need to be nurtured, but we're born with these things. They're in us right from the beginning, and they often show up from when we were very, very young. I'm in a position right now, I'm standing in front of you, and I'm giving you a talk. I'm using words to try to communicate something to you and hopefully connect and impart something in you. But when I look back at my early days, I can see this from when I was very, very young, even though it kind of manifested a little bit differently, right? So, one of the things that I would do when I was young, I was in primary school back in Africa, right? I would make these cards, right? You know, like the birthday cards and stuff that you get from the shop, right? I could draw a little bit, so I would make these cards, but I would make these romantic cards, right? I would have been like less than 10 or something like that, right? I would make these romantic cards, right? And then I would sell these cards to my friends for some pocket money so that if they had a girl that they liked, they could buy one of these cards from me and they can go and give it to that girl to try to make them their girlfriend or something like that, right? Now, this is very, very random, right? I don't really do that anymore in a sense, but this is when I was very, very young, right? But even then, I always had a thing for words, right? That was just my thing. It was just in me from when I was very young. I didn't necessarily imagine or know that I would be doing this and standing in front of people and talking right now. But I always had a thing for words. Another thing is I used to talk a lot as well, right? Are there anyone else in this room that gets told that they talk too much? Anyone? Yeah? Right? Okay, those are my people, right? I would often be told that I talk too much, right? But once again, these are things from when I was very young. I always loved to communicate, whether that's writing and now writing music and writing songs, whether that's speaking. I get opportunities to speak in schools, in places like this, speak in church and preach there. But I always was a talker, and I didn't know that it was going to take me there. But can you see that potential was always there? Can you see that? Right? And so it's in the same way, I encourage you to think about yourselves. Think, what are the things that you're passionate about right now? Or maybe what are the things that you've been passionate about since you were very young? What are the things about you, the way that you think, the way that you act, the way that you do things that's just uniquely about you? What are these things? Think about these things, because often these things have to do with your potential and your purpose. Because remember, we all have potential and we all have purpose. Do we believe that? Yeah? Do we believe that? Yeah. All right, I hope we do. Now, maybe for some of us, in the circumstances that we grew up, left us feeling that maybe we didn't have potential or we didn't have purpose. Maybe we grew up in difficult circumstances. Maybe we grew up in circumstances where there was abuse or there was neglect. Or maybe there was no one to wrap their hand around us and say, hey, I believe in you. Hey, I see something in you. Maybe that was our circumstance. But I want to tell you once again, you are born with this. That doesn't change the fact that you have potential and purpose, right? If no one's ever told you this before, let me tell you now. You have potential and purpose. Like Dennis said before, you have something to contribute to our community. Not just our community, you have something to contribute to this world. And you were made and you were born to do that. Does that make sense? Yes? All right, wonderful. Now, the next challenge then is, in discovering that, is then unlocking it. Let me just say one more thing as well. If you're struggling to find out those things, you look back and you're like, I can't really think of, something about me that was, unique, or something that makes sense, something that I feel is purposeful about me, or where I have potential. If you're in that place and you can't really think of something, this is something that's always helped me, right? Is serve. Yeah? Put yourself in positions where you can serve. Whatever it is that you can do it. However you can help. It doesn't need to be very skillful. It doesn't need to be very fancy. It doesn't need to be very talented. Whatever it is. But put yourself in a position where you can serve and where you can be of help to others. Because often it's in doing those things that when either you will discover something about you, a passion about yourself, or someone else will discover that and call that out in you. Does that make sense? Yeah? All right. Let's move on. So, unlocking potential. How do we unlock potential? What are some keys, if you like, to unlocking potential? And what I want to propose today is that the development of character is the key to unlocking your potential. All right, let me say it again. The development of character is the key to unlocking your potential. Now, how many of you know about the story of the tortoise and the rabbit? Yeah, the tortoise and the rabbit, tortoise and the hare. Sometimes it's called. Yeah, who's heard of it? Okay, who has never heard of that story? No, okay, cool. Well, let me give you a quick rundown. All right. So basically, there's a race, right? There's a race between a tortoise and a rabbit. Now, in the normal race, who's gonna win, tortoise or rabbit? Tortoise. All right. Okay, but if all things normal, you would think that the rabbit's gonna win because it's faster, right? It's just naturally faster. Okay, so there's this race. Race happens, right? Rabbit zoom sprints right ahead. Gets somewhere close to the finish line, and he goes, the tortoise is slow. He's never going to catch up. I'm just going to sit down and have a bit of a rest. So he sits down, has a bit of a rest, falls asleep, has a bit of a nap. But the tortoise, just one step at a time, just keeps on going, just keeps on going, just keeps on going. And by the time that the rabbit wakes up, the tortoise is there, right at the finish line, and crosses it. It's too late. The tortoise ends up winning the race. Right? So, that is a classic story of how and why it is character that ultimately will help us to unlock our potential, not just skills, not just talent, not just potential, right? It's character that's going to help us to unlock it. You see, the rabbit, he got prideful, he got boastful, he got lazy, he thought it was easy, and so he ended up losing. He didn't reach his potential. But the tortoise, what did he do? One step at a time. Right? One step at a time. And I really think that there is something in there for all of us. Now, there's a book that's called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Right? And in this book, the author lists 7 steps of highly effective people. People who are effective in life, people who reach their potential. And he says that these are the 7 general habits that these people have, right? And I'm just going to go through them quickly and just give them to you. 1, he says that these people are proactive, right? They're proactive. They take the first step, they take initiative, and they act in a way that aligns with their values, right? So consider what your values are and be proactive in making steps towards them. Second, these people begin with the end in mind. They don't just do things. They think about the end in mind, right? It's not just momentary. They're thinking about the future. They put first things first. These people, they have their priorities set. I know some of you are taking notes. Let me know if I'm going too fast. So they put first things first. These people, they also think win-win, right? So they're not selfish. They're not just out there to get their own glory, but they think win-win. They look at situations where not only they can succeed, but others can succeed as well. These people, they seek first to understand, then to be understood. They don't make everything all about them. They seek to understand others and then to communicate and then to be understood. They're good listeners. These people, they synergize or they collaborate. They work well with other people. They have the ability to collaborate. And also, these people invest in their own renewal and growth. Whether we're talking physical, whether we're talking emotional, whether we're talking mental, spiritual, these people invest in their own renewal and in their own growth. Does that make sense? Right? So these are the 7 habits that the author puts down of people who are highly effective. And similarly, and closer to my heart and to my field, the Bible in the book of Galatians talks about the fruit of the Spirit, right? And it says that the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Let me say it again. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And what I see, especially in Christian circles, is that sometimes there's a bit of a battle between gifts and fruit. The Bible also talks about gifts of the Spirit, and these are abilities and talents that God gives to people, right? So it could be things like leadership, it could be things like prophecy, it could be things like speaking in tongues, all these kind of spiritual gifts that God gives to people. And sometimes I see a bit of a struggle between the gifts and the fruit. And so similarly with potential, you can have the gifts and all these abilities that God has given you, but if you don't have the fruit, if you don't have love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control, you're not going to reach that potential of that gift. You're not going to be able to go where you could go with that if you don't have the fruit. Does that make sense? Yeah, so it's like this, it's the same way. So all these things have to do with our character, who we are. And in my working with young people, oftentimes I work with students who are maybe in year 11 or 12 and they're thinking about the future. They're thinking, what am I going to do? And that's important. But I think